I am sick and tired of hearing about how wonderful the transportation system is in France and Japan, and have you been to Shanghai, or do you know what they're doing in Beijing? Well, finally, California is going to get it right with this new high-speed rail, and that northern terminus will happen here. And this project,
2,000 years later,
in California, a little train going from San Francisco to Los Angeles that's being run by Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. Did you ever hear of Gavin Newsom? He has got, that train is the worst cost overrun I've ever seen. It's like totally out of control. So then they said, all right, we won't go into San Francisco. We'll stop 25 miles short. And we won't go into Los Angeles. We'll stop 25 miles short. They have airplanes that go there for one 100th the cost. And they have cars. They have a thing called the highway that goes back and forth. That's not fully utilized. And they got involved with this project.
So California Governor Gavin Newsom is pretty hilariously fuming tonight after the Trump administration has just announced it will be finally shutting down and pulling the plug on, frankly, what is one of the most naked and ridiculous instances of government corruption, embezzlement, and just sheer incompetence in modern American history. Frankly, I think this whole thing is an underrated scandal that ought to weigh heavily on Newsom's future 2028 presidential campaign, and that is exactly the infamous California high-speed rail project. Essentially, it's this idea that you've now heard about for decades to build a bullet train from the city of Los Angeles to San Francisco. And those of you who are longtime subscribers on this channel may know this is one of those random political issues that I'm just furiously passionate about because I grew up in Los Angeles. I remember this whole thing. For context here, and not to make anyone feel old, I mean, even it makes me at 22 years old feel pretty old about this, but the ballot proposition, guys, to build this high-speed rail passed in 2008 when I was in kindergarten. When I was in kindergarten, they said they're going to build this train. Okay, the construction began about the time I was in middle school. It is a decade later, and virtually nothing has been built, and they've essentially built a couple train tracks in the Central Valley that have already rightfully been dubbed the train to nowhere because it frankly does absolutely go nowhere. And so the timeline here has been that for several months, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has been investigating the high-speed rail, and we just got the announcement tonight. It is officially done. Now, as someone who, I'm not totally against the idea of America having a more rail infrastructure, right? I think, frankly, it might be a good option to have, right? A lot of other countries do this. But frankly, in the name of not bankrupting this country, when you see the writing on the wall, we'll show you the full ridiculous timeline here. It really does justify a lot. And you see, for instance, Gavin Newsom definitely not happy about the whole thing. So we'll give you those full details here in today's video because it is kind of hilarious, but also kind of sad. With that said, guys, just do us a favor as usual. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing here, guys, is the best way to support our videos and ensure that we can keep bringing you this great coverage. And with that said, so let us, I guess, start here. We'll give you the current announcement here in a second, but I first of all want to, again, explain here essentially what has gone wrong with the California high-speed rail. And it's the purest form of, you look at something like USAID, right? The way in which money essentially gets embezzled from government dollars to shady non-government organizations. These contracts, very little gets done. The goals they're trying to achieve are quite mystifying. I mean, to give you a little bit of perspective here, the initial ballot proposition in 2008 set $10 billion, which is at the time all they thought they had needed to build. And again, a high-speed rail here from California, from LA, I should say, to San Francisco. The price tag then, guys, went up from $33 billion to now $135 billion. There's absolutely no completion date in sight. All they have built is essentially, they're about to finish right now, a train that would connect not LA to San Francisco, obviously, after about a decade, but Merced to Bakersfield. And for those of you who don't know the area, we're basically talking about two places in the middle of California's Central Valley. It is more or less a desert that are sparsely populated and, not really all that far from each other. Let me just say, I'm not exactly sure a lot of international tourists are clamoring from all around the world to go to California to take, the bullet train from nowhere to nowhere. No offense to those places, okay? We love the Central Valley, but we obviously know what we're saying here. And just for context there, you could give every single LA and San Francisco resident almost 200 free flights in total, right, for that much money. So, kind of begging the question, what is even the point at this level of building the train? And the Department of Transportation has apparently put together a very nice video that explains this issue even better than I can. So here, for those of you who are not familiar, is the issue, the struggle with California's high-speed rail, which you really understand, right? What's happening here? Shady government contracts and contractors are basically embezzling that money, and we know how it goes, but take a listen.
The estimated costs that have shot up from $33 billion to $43 billion.
The project is estimated to cost $68 billion.
A new report shows California's high-speed rail project is costing taxpayers more than $3 million a day. The LA Times reports the budget has grown to $77 billion.
The cost for the project, though, has jumped to nearly $128 billion, much higher than the $33 billion voters approved in 2008.
The project is no longer a $33 billion project. The project's years and years behind. The project's wildly over budget. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but it is a bad idea not to be truthful about things.
Gavin Newsom is a bad idea, and so is California's high-speed rail boondoggle. It's now projected to cost $135 billion. For that price tag, we could give every single resident of LA and San Francisco almost 200 free flights. This is the definition of government incompetence and possibly corruption. That's why we're pulling the plug. No more federal funds for this high-speed train to nowhere. President Trump and I won't help Gavin Newsom waste your money.
Now look, here's the thing. Obviously, $130 billion is quite a ridiculous price tag. There is no chance on the planet you're going to be getting that return on investment after all that has been sunk into this project. But perhaps, maybe, as a genuine good faith individual, you could make a case for justifying it if there was remotely any progress being made on this front, right? If they kept ticking it up, but they're actually building something and they're showing any evidence they are close to completion, they're giving you a date, you're seeing stuff being built, that might, maybe justify a little bit of this. But of course, we know that is not the case. As a matter of fact, this image right here that you can see on your screen basically sums up the entire California project. This is something that is dubbed the Bridge to Nowhere because, as you can see, they built this here, supposed to be part of the high-speed rail. Look at it. It's literally going nowhere. Okay, that's all they've done, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars, that's all you can produce. We know exactly what is going on here because, look, if you are curious about how this stuff works, obviously, I'm going to assume many of the people watching this video are not experts in train construction or anything along those lines. Here is a side-by-side, perhaps, of an infrastructure project that recently happened in Florida, very similar to build a high-speed train, which is now complete, by the way, between the cities of Orlando and Miami. This is known as the Brightline train, by the way. This is a private project. Okay, it's worth noting there. This is not something that even costed the taxpayers really anything here. But again, okay, so here's the timeline, here's the budget, and then let's compare. So the Brightline initial construction in South Florida, which connected Miami to West Palm Beach, took roughly 4 years from 2014 to 2018. You could even argue maybe that was a little bit long, maybe that was a little bit inefficient, but guess what? Built something, whereas in the span of almost 20 years now, all that's been built in California, about to be finished finally, goes from Merced to Bakersfield, but the subsequent extension to Orlando took an additional 4 years from 2019. It was finished in 2023, so the Brightline is obviously now up and running. Very useful thing to use, by the way, if you got a flight or something, or you want to take a weekend trip there. The total cost for Miami to Orlando was approximately $6 billion. $6 billion compared to $135 billion. The question, of course, is what is going on there? Well, obviously, there is no attempt whatsoever to even build this train. It is very obvious this is a blatant and naked instance of government corruption, right? Where you have these contractors, you're paying them money, they don't do anything, but probably friends, donors to the California Democrat Party, right? We know how that all goes. And frankly, you look at these numbers, there's no excuse. By the way, it's also worth noting here too, guys, okay? If you're curious about this, apparently Brightline out in the West Coast has begun construction on a train from Las Vegas to Southern California, the LA area there. They just began construction in 2024. It's expected to take about 4 years, with service anticipated here in 2028. Again, this is a privately funded construction. Now, it's not almost the exact same distance, but is relatively equidistant here, right? Judging, it's about like a 4-hour drive to Vegas from LA. San Francisco, probably about 5 to 6, depending on traffic. But it's worth noting, right? They're building Vegas to LA in 4 years. 15, 16 years, however long it's been, nothing has been built. Virtually nothing's been built to San Francisco, right? So, of course, what is going on there? I mean, we know the answer, okay? Because, as you can see, I've been bringing it up here. Finally, right, Gavin Newsom is celebrating the fact that his high-speed trail has been now scaled back to, it's not even a high-speed train, by the way. It is a regular train, typical old Amtrak, okay? From Merced to Bakersfield. And even this, guys, is a decade behind schedule. $10 billion over budget, and I think you can virtually now understand why it fully makes sense for the federal government to say, we're no longer using taxpayers across the country to subsidize your stupidity and your corruption. Here's how it goes.
Check that Merced to Bakersfield line was expected to cost California taxpayers $35.3 billion. Are now warning lawmakers that cost could grow again, now up to $38.5 billion. This also means the project's budget gap could reach up to even more than $10 billion again, just for this Central Valley segment. The High-Speed Rail Authority has confirmed these new figures. Now, the possible funding gap presents even more questions about the project. That Bakersfield to Merced line was expected to be completed between 2030 and 2033, but the project's inspector general earlier this year warned that may no longer be the case. The High-Speed Rail Authority at some point this summer is expected to have a full update on what's going on, but in those documents that we obtained to get this information and that project leaders have confirmed, they note the cost estimate has a range depending on a variety of factors. Those factors include inflation and the rising cost of materials like concrete and copper. The High-Speed Rail Authority is eyeing possible design changes to save money potentially. So,
okay, correction there, because I was hearing that the Bakersfield line was almost already done. Apparently, it's now being pushed back to the 2030s, which I once again note, who is taking a train from Bakersfield to Merced? Okay, again, basically no one. I don't know. You're going to haul farm equipment on that or something? Like, what is the point of even building this, right? Well, of course, absolutely, there is no point, hence why early on into the administration, as part of the DOGE effort, Trump announced he would be investigating this high-speed rail to thunderous outroar from Democrats. But guess what? As usual, he was just completely right about this. It's ridiculous. It's totally indefensible. Not in any way.
One of the things I want to investigate rapidly, because I've never seen anything to this extent, the train that's being built between Los Angeles and San Francisco is the worst managed project I think I've ever seen, and I've seen some of the worst. Billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars over budget. In fact, I read where you could take every single person that was going to go on the train and get the finest limousine service in the world and take them back and forth with limousines, and you'd have hundreds of billions of dollars left over. It is the worst thing, and we're going to start an investigation of that because it's not possible. I built for a living, and I built on time, on budget. It's impossible that something could cost that much. And now it's not even going to San Francisco, and it's not going to Los Angeles. They made it much shorter. So now it's at little places way away from San Francisco and way away from Los Angeles. No, we're going to start a big investigation on that because I've never seen anything like it. Nobody has ever seen anything like it. The worst overruns that there have ever been in the history of our country.
Again, the last administration wasted so much money on projects that never work. If you're going to have high-speed rail, you're going to invest billions. We should actually have high-speed rail in America, not boondoggles that fund political friends and allies.
They have from San Francisco, inside of San Francisco to Los Angeles. Should have never been built because airplanes do it better. And you could drive it. You could drive it. No problem with driving it. The roads aren't even crowded. So they were going to do this. Somebody's idea. Somebody got paid off a lot of money, and they started it. It was going to cost a very small amount of money. and it ended up costing literally hundreds of times what the original. And now what they did is they said, well, going into the city is too big a deal, so we'll leave it 25 miles short of the city. So now they're leaving it. They're not going to finish it, really. It's not the same project. So now they're leaving it outside of San Francisco and outside, short of each. They just want to get it done, and I've never seen cost overruns. You know, if you have a cost overrun of 10%, you should be ashamed of yourself. 20%, you should not do any more jobs. This is a cost overrun of 2,000%, something like that. It's unlimited, and it's not finished. And maybe it will never get finished. And I told Sean, look at it from every standpoint, but we don't want to, you know, we have federal money going into that, and it's like throwing it out the window. So whatever you can do to stop it.
$15 billion and not one track has been laid. $15 billion and we're 16 years into the project, not one track.
You know, it's perplexing too, because China, which is a gigantic nation, obviously, has high-speed rail that connects a lot of its major cities. Okay, and as I said, like, I'm not entirely against the idea of America having it. I think it's a nice option, right? Maybe some people take the train, some people like to keep the cars. I'm probably more of a car guy myself. But, you know, it'd be a nice thing to have as a nation. But what is the point of doing that when you're going to bankrupt the country? I even asked the question as to Europe, right? So Europeans are pretty left-wing. You go to those nations, a lot of government bureaucracy. It's kind of like the Democrat paradise in some regards, some, not all, but some regards, right, in terms of policy and stuff. How were they able to, because you can go to Europe, you can take a train from Paris to Rome, like, very easily, and they built that somehow. Even with all their bureaucracy, all their corruption, it really shows to show you, right, how bad it is in California. I mean, ridiculous. So anyways, with all that in mind, I think the argument has been well made by now. It needs to be shut down. So tonight, Donald Trump has announced that to the law-abiding, tax-paying, hard-working citizens of the United States of America, I have officially freed you from funding. Thank you. California's disastrously overpriced high-speed train to nowhere. This boondoggle, led by the incompetent governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has cost taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars, and we have received, yes, nothing in return. Not one single thing. Unbelievable. Except cost overruns. The railroad we were promised still does not exist. 2008, by the way, was when it was introduced, and never will. This project was severely overpriced, overregulated, and never delivered. Thanks to Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, not a single penny in federal dollars will ever go towards this Newsom scam ever again. This was ill-conceived and an unnecessary project, and a total waste of money, but no more. There you have it. So Gavin Newsom, of course, is responding to all of this, saying, quote, I won't be taking advice from the guy who can't keep planes in the sky. Wow. So clever, so witty. Hey, Gavin, how come the train's not built, huh? You gonna actually respond to that? No, of course not. Okay, so there you go. Basically, nothing there. I am reminded here also, it's very interesting. Again, the left-wing outroar over this in the state of California. Because it was just a couple months ago when Secretary Sean Duffy was taking a visit to California as part of his investigation, as they announced months ago, into the high-speed rail, which is now concluded in its total defunding. And he was met by, guess what, protesters, right? Angry Democrats, angry liberals were showing up chanting, and I quote, build the rail, which is a hilarious and ridiculous irony, of course, to it all, that leftists are apparently blaming the Trump administration for this train not being built. Not the fact that California Democrats, for decades now, have failed to build the rail. I mean, if you're going to go chant build the rail, why aren't you chanting outside the governor's mansion, right? Totally ridiculous behavior, but again, this is, what we're dealing with. Like, they're seriously going to blame Trump for the fact that this is being defunded, not the fact that, Gavin Newsom, you know how it goes, but take a listen.
I want to address the protesters for a moment, if I could. I think they were chanting, build the rail. It's been 17 years and $16 billion, and no rail has been built. So if you want to go protest somewhere, if you want to shout at someone, go to the governor's mansion. Go talk to Democrats in the legislature who have brought us this crappy project. Right, so we've seen over the course of the last month what DOGE has exposed with regard to fraud, waste, and abuse. And we're done with it. And you know what? You're going to have people who love fraud, who love waste, who love trains to nowhere. But all of us up here, we do not love fraud, waste, and abuse. We are going to use the taxpayer money
efficiently and effectively, and this is a boondoggle.
I mean, seriously, what are these likely paid protesters even mad about? He's right. He's right. You want to build the rail? Ask Gavin Newsom why the rail's not been built. But of course, we know how this goes. Now, ironically, amidst all of it, right, you're going to basically now see the argument that Gavin Newsom's going to be making going forward into 2028, which is despite all of his failure in California, and, to his credit, it's not all him that's destroyed the state, right? It's decades of leadership, but he certainly has not made the situation here any better. He recently went on the Sean Ryan podcast in Tennessee to show that, hey, he's not scared to talk to Republicans. He's willing to have this debate. And the defense he's kind of invented here for California is something you often hear, which is basically going along the lines of, well, California has the largest GDP, right? It's the largest state, by the way, also by population in the country. Like, we pay the most taxes. We have all these wealthy people. Of course, just completely ignoring the fact that California's prosperity has been like that for decades, okay? Not to sound like the leftists in some regards, but hey, Gavin Newsom, you didn't build that, okay? It's been like that for a long time. By the way, California sort of claim to fame, its meteoric rise in American history actually occurred back when it was a red state. And the objective reality is ever since it was handed to Democrats, it is just slowly falling off the cliff in virtually every single metric. There's a reason why people are fleeing out of the state. Okay, there's a reason you guys lost electoral votes in the latest census here. But apparently, despite all of that, okay, let's take a listen as to kind of his argument as to how, well, California is subsidizing the rest of you guys. You guys hate us so much, but, we're really the best state. And, I think when you consider this high-speed rail debacle, you really see how quickly this argument of, like, California superiority actually does fall apart in real time. But let's listen and react to it live here, okay?
What separates our game from the game played elsewhere is innovation, entrepreneurialism, more patents, more engineers, more researchers, more Nobel laureates in my state than any other damn state, more Fortune 500 companies in my state than any other state. Look that up, because I know people are rolling their eyes and saying, no, it's Texas. You're wrong.
It's true.
Okay. So first of all, Gavin, if that's true, and by the way, it is. By the way, you're the largest state in the country by population. Hey, dingus. Hey, But okay. So according to you, you have all these engineers, you have all these Nobel Prize winners, you have all the Fortune 500 companies. Okay, all right. I'll take you on that argument. With all of that supposed talent and high IQ and business acumen and all these things, why can't you build the simple train then? Huh? Like, how hard is it? So, that's of course number one. Secondly, Gavin, it's about the trends here, as I keep on saying. You didn't build that. So what's happening? Ever since you took office, okay, a bunch of Fortune 500s are leaving the state, right? So are your Nobel Prize winners, all that stuff. Texas is, guess what? Catching you in that regard in terms of GDP, in terms of business, all that. They're catching up to you, Gavin. Do you understand that? It's like this. Imagine that you're from a rich family. Okay, you inherited a mansion and a Ferrari as your inheritance. Okay, so you crashed the Ferrari, you totaled it, but you still have it, but it's totaled, right? You burned down half your mansion having some crazy party or something. It's just destroyed. The remnants of it, they're still there. And you're running around telling people, yeah, I drive a Ferrari. Yeah, I live in a mansion. That not only did you not build, you inherited, okay, fine, but you also destroyed your inheritance. That's a seriously generational way of stupidity. Like, how do you do that, right? That's the Gavin Newsom argument right now. Not only did he have an inheritance, he destroyed it and then is bragging about it. It's ridiculous, but okay, let's keep listening. So Sean Ryan, I don't know why he's not going to push back on it. He doesn't see the obvious flaw in this argument. Again, you didn't build that. What Fortune 500 company came into California under your leadership compared to left? Huh? I mean, it's a very simple way to measure this, but anyways.
I looked it up.
And we're, by the way, a donor state. We provided $83.1 billion more than we received from the federal government. Texas took $71.1 billion. I'm not saying that to bash Texas, but you know what? Pretty proud of my goddamn state.
I saw that
above
too.
Our weight, man. But AI...
It also depends how you count things like Social Security payments and those different metrics. But okay, so with all of that in mind, again, Gavin, if your state's so amazing, why can't you build the train? Why can't you build the train?
Repeat those numbers.
$83.1 billion we provided more to the federal government than we received. In the same year that Texas received $71.1 billion more than they provided to the federal government.
So you're net positive.
Net positive. 9 out of 10 of the donor states are Trump states, and I don't mean that pejoratively, Trump. 7 of the 10 are Republican states, but 9 out of the 10.
So now he's shifting it. Suddenly it's 7 out of 10, now it's 9 out of 10. Yeah. Who are the governors in that state? What's the local leadership there?
Dependent states, welfare states are Trump states. The donor states disproportionately the blue states. 71% of the country's GDP comes from blue counties. Mm-hmm. These same crack-up counties with all these crazy liberals that can't get out of their own goddamn way and the world's come to an end. It's 71% of the economy of the goddamn country, man.
Notice he says blue counties and not blue states, because the reality is this narrative that Republican states are poor has completely fallen apart in recent decades. Because guess what? They're always saying California is the largest economy. New York is the third largest. Okay, who's second and fourth? Texas and Florida, right? By the way, you're right, Mississippi, the state they so often bash, had the second highest GDP growth in 2024. And now, by many accounts, right, one of the poorest states in this country, worst education, all that stuff is, guess what? New Mexico, who's been a blue state for a very long time, right? So blue states, essentially, the flex he's making here is that they got a head start, which they did. That's true, right? You look at California, the Northeast, New York, those places are historically wealthier. They're falling behind the South, for instance, the Deep South, who has historically, for basically all of American history, been poorer than other parts, is now shooting up like this meteor. They're catching you very fast, and you're, instead of saying, oh, wait a minute, they're catching us, saying, oh, look, we're still ahead. It's like, it's just ridiculous. But anyways, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. What do you think of Newsom's little train to nowhere? What do you think of Trump cutting the funding? Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.